I'm just going to get started with a quick round of thank yous to Busboys and Poets for hosting us tonight, to my organization, the Center for Economic and Policy Research, and all our colleagues who have helped put this together, and to our very distinguished list of co-sponsors, Black Alliance for Peace, the Institute for Policy Studies, the Haiti Advocacy Working Group, the Haiti Response Coalition, and the Haitian American Foundation for Democracy. And the idea with this book is it's obviously it's not the end, it's the beginning. It's a tool for advocacy, for learning about U.S. policy, and for fighting for change. And so I'm glad to have all these groups here tonight and supporting this and working in the future. So I'm going to turn things over to former Representative Andy Levin, who has been kind enough to join us here tonight to offer some introductory remarks. For those that don't know, Representative Levin founded the Haiti Caucus and has a long history with Haiti that I hope he shares a little bit with us tonight. So without further ado, Mr. Andy Levin.
Second that. Third.
All right. Well, good evening, y'all. This is an amazing turnout. Jake, you're a star. This is so great. Let's hear it for Jake Johnston. So, I got involved in Haiti when I was in college, and I went down to Haiti to study the impact of USAID in the country, and I kind of decided that the main impact was propping up the Duvalier dictatorship. And I mention that because, Jake's book does such an incredible job of placing what's been happening in Haiti while he was directly doing research and studying it in Haitian history, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion because we have this amazing historian of Haitian history who will moderate the discussion. But I think, look, what the heck is happening, right? I mean, Haiti is in the worst situation it's been in a long time, and I just am so resistant to this dominant narrative that I basically consider a racist narrative. Oh, poor Haiti. Oh, failed state. Haiti can never catch a break. Haiti is, it's an earthquake, right? It's an assassination of a president. All these terrible things that happen. And I'm sorry, from 1980 when I went first, till I went back in '87 to observe the first attempt at a presidential election, which was horribly aborted, and we came under gunfire at a polling place, and we had to go document the massacre at the École Argentine, which was sort of the proximate cause of the election being canceled. To when I went back in the early '90s to document what happened after Jean-Bertrand Aristide was overthrown the first time. And the sort of systematic attack on all the little groups of civil society that had grown up. And through to my time in Congress, I see Haiti as this phenomenal country of possibility and culture and arts and cuisine and science and just brilliant possibility, that it's not just some happenstance or some failure of the Haitian people. We have to place it in its place in the global order of countries. And I think when I read Jake's book, what I thought was so important about it was that it makes us ask questions about what has U.S. policy towards Haiti really been about all these years. what is our goal? Because there's a surface narrative that's always going on. We support democracies, right? We support democracy. We support elections. We always want elections. But in fact, if you look at what's happened, the US for hundreds of years has not supported self-determination for the Haitian people, right? We were very strong in supporting this obscene demand of the French after the Haitians became the first and only successful rebellion of slaves at a national level, that Haiti, the country, owed France for taking away its property, like the people of Haiti and the land of Haiti. Truly an obscenity, right? But the US enforced this. The Marines went in and occupied Haiti from 1915 to 1934. As I said, when I was there during the Duvalier dictatorship, we treated Haiti as a Cold War client state, that we didn't care that there was a lack of democracy actually in our behavior, because they would do, they were on our side against the other side in the Cold War against the Soviet Union, and so on and so forth. And then when you come up to more recent times, right? What would Haiti really having a democracy mean? I mean, a country of 11 million, mostly poor people, like they might want higher wages, right? They might want infrastructure to get their products to market. They might want to be able to form a union if they damn well please. And they might not want to do whatever the 6 or 7 families that dominate the Haitian economy and the corporations that go in there and say, we will make some clothes here or something, what they want. And in fact, the US has repeatedly sided with corrupt politicians and the economic elite in Haiti against the idea of really having a popular democracy there. And when I went to Congress, after a long time of not being able to work on Haiti, and by the way, I have to point out, because it doesn't usually happen when I'm in DC, that my wife, Mary Freeman, is here. So I'm really excited that my wife is here joining us from Michigan. So yeah, give it up for Mary. So, I went back to Congress after not having really worked on Haiti day to day for years. And yes, I created a Haiti caucus, and I have to give a shout out to the chairman of the then chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Craig Meeks, now the ranking member, because he really supported us doing more oversight on Haiti than had been done in years, through the Latin America Subcommittee and the overall Foreign Affairs Committee. But really, we saw in Haiti, before Jovenel, one of the things that bugs me is all the press says, oh, all this problem started when the president was assassinated. Give me a break, right? We had, from Martelly to Moïse, through to Henri, we had a steady gangsterization of the country, a kleptocracy that was stealing money, drug trafficking. We had a government that allowed the shriveling of democracy altogether and had did not conduct elections, to the point where there are no elected officials left in Haiti at the local or national level. And what we saw in Haiti before Moïse was assassinated was the US refusing to listen to the Haitian people, to work with the Haitian people. In particular, I was impressed by efforts in civil society to come together, and I watched this happening. I'm sitting there in Congress, I'm like, oh my God. Women's groups, peasant groups, bar associations, human rights organizations, business groups, unions, religious groups of, Catholic, Protestant, and Voodoo, all coming across all these differences and all this diversity of interest in Haitian society, saying, okay, we're in an unconstitutional realm. Moïse is not a constitutional ruler at this point. We're going to rebuild democracy. And they created an accord and found a path forward. And the reaction of the US government wasn't, wow, look at this amazing effort to rebuild democracy. They were like, we recognize, you know, Moise gets another year, even though everybody in Haiti said he didn't. And then we recognize Henri when nobody in Haiti really thought that was a legitimate thing. So this is why this book is so important as I read it. Jake Johnston tells the story of the last decade or so especially, without flinching and without kowtowing, and really showing what the US was actually doing and what US policy has amounted to. And so I think this book gives us tools to ask a question as Americans. How can we get our government to not have a racist policy towards Haiti, to not have a policy that fails to see the Haitian people, but where we actually lift up the vast majority of Haitians who just want to live in peace, they just want to have some prosperity, they just want to have a say over, you know, their own lives. And let me just leave you with a story. In that election that I was an observer to in 1987, that was, you know, the election lasted until about 9 a.m. And then the coup regime that had been there called it off, conveniently for them. But literally, I was in Carrefour and at a polling place, and got a carload of people came by in a Toyota Corolla with guns out the windows. I saw it for like a second before it happened, and they strafed the polling place with gunfire. And only because there was walls around this school, right, a typical schoolyard, were people not killed. And people ran away screaming, right? But here's the point. Within 20, I don't know how long really, it's a long time ago, let's say 20, 30 minutes, the line to vote reformed. I was like, what? I honestly, I couldn't process it, really. And then, so I said, well, Andy, get your, you know, start doing your job, interview the people. You know, I'm supposed to be an observer, right? So I said to this woman, who may not have been older than I am now, but I was in my 20s. I thought she was really old. So I said, ma'am, you know, why did you come back here, you know, after this? And she said, you know what? I've lived here all my life. I've never had any say in my government. And I'm going to choose my own government, you know, no matter what. And this is what Donald Trump called a shithole country. That woman knew more about democracy than Donald Trump ever did. And I'm sorry to say that our current president, you know, I support, but we have not fundamentally changed policy since what the Trump policy was. And it's really time for the US to turn the page on Haiti and support bottom-up democracy in Haiti like we claim to support in our own country and every country around the world. And Jake's book does a huge service to trying to make that happen. Jake, come on up.
Thank you, Andy. We miss you in Congress. So I am thrilled tonight to be here, and especially so because who I have with me up here, who I've gotten to know a little bit better in recent months. Nathalie Frédéric Pierre, who is I'm going to read this so I don't get this wrong, Nathalie, forgive me. The Assistant Professor of African Diaspora History at Howard University, and the 2023-2024 National Endowment for the Humanities Faculty Fellow. She survived the 2010 earthquake while conducting archival research for her forthcoming book, which we're looking forward to, which examines the political imaginaries of Black revolutionaries. As a Haitian immigrant, she brings a unique perspective to her research, informed by her commitment to the Flanbwayan Haitian Literacy Project, an education advocacy group that works with migrant Haitian teens affected by the earthquake. And I'm especially happy because we can learn a little bit about Haitian history tonight too, and not just talk about my book, so that's great. So, Nathalie, I will turn things over to you.
There's a microphone on the other side for you. There you are.
What a crowd. I'm excited to see all of you. I know that there is a range of political perspective in this room, and I am simply trying to moderate this so as many of these perspectives can be brought to light, because we need all hands on deck. All of the Haitians in the room know this adage, mais en pile, chai palu. It means with many hands, the load is light. So we are looking forward to your active participation in this book conversation.
So let's get started. Where do you want to start here, Nathalie?
I'd like to begin with definitional premises, okay? So that we're all on the same page with what it is that we're talking about. So you have a lot of big buzzwords in the book title. So if we could just start with defining what this tentacle-like aid state is, how does elite panic within Haitian borders and outside Haitian borders animate this aid state? So I'll just stop with those two so that we all know what it is that we're talking about.
You're gonna make this hard. Yeah, so aid state, and I think really what it is a pushback on this concept of failed state. We heard Andy talk about this, and this is not, that idea of pushing back on the concept of Haiti as a failed state is not something I came up with. Right? This is something that Haitian scholars have been writing about for decades, and I'm going to kick things over to Nathalie eventually to tell us a little about that history. But it's easy to look at the situation, and obviously it is very true today, but I think it has been true for some time, that outsiders look at Haiti and it's easy to throw your hands up, say, oh, crisis, this is what I keep seeing, this must be a failed state. And it ignores the reality of how that came to be. It ignores the greater context that we see. And so, this term aid state is really about pushing back on that and recognizing that the state we see in Haiti today is not a state that is representative of the Haitian people writ large. It is a state that has been shaped as much by outside actors as the Haitian people. And so this, I think, directly relates to this concept of elite panic. And I think that has so much to do with it. And I think, again, we can get into more of the history, but this has been the response of the world to Haiti from its inception. It is panic, the fear of what Haiti is, the fear of what Haiti stands for, and the fear, like Andy was describing, of what a democracy in Haiti might actually do, what a democracy in Haiti might actually be. And yeah, of course, that comes from sources internal to Haiti and sources external to Haiti. And the line there blurs because the Haitian elite, in a lot of ways, are as connected in the US and connected to the US as they are to Haiti. I think in a lot of respects, they might consider themselves more a part of the US than a part of Haiti. And so where we draw that line is a bit arbitrary, right? But the ultimate point is that it's that fear, and I think it's that fear that animates so much of policy towards Haiti. The fear of the unknown, the fear of change, the fear of what an actual democracy in Haiti would cause, and what that would tell the rest of the world. That was the fear from the beginning, from the founding of the nation.
So thank you for that definition. I just want to quickly try to connect this aid state with what's currently going on in Haiti. So if you could briefly talk about how the aid state and these institutions empowered some of the crisis that's going on right now, with a particular emphasis on the elite panic.
Yeah, so I think, in a lot of ways, the situation in Haiti today, and I'm not going to give a huge rundown of sort of the blow-by-blow news from the last 3 weeks. Things have been crazy and moving really fast, and we can get into more of that. But in so many ways, what's happening in Haiti today is exactly explained by this, right? It is the absence of the state. It is a state that is not representative of or accountable to the Haitian population, that has disenfranchised massive parts of the population, including the popular neighborhoods of the capital, right? That now are controlled by and producing these armed groups that are capturing the world's attention. But that didn't happen in a vacuum. That's been happening for a long time. That's been building for a long time. It's not just about them taking up arms. It's about the bigger structures of the state And also, I think we can see how this manifests itself, right? One thing I talk about in the book consistently, and Andy mentioned this as well, is the way that US policy and its political puppeteering in Haiti has empowered the worst actors in Haiti and consolidated their power. And so in a lot of ways, what I think of as the aid state, right, is it's basically been an attempt to perpetuate and consolidate what is, at its core, an inherently unsustainable status quo that was never actually taking care of the people or going to provide development for the population. And it's these constant foreign interventions, and they're not just a problem because of the intervention itself, it's because what the effect has been to lift up and allow this unsustainable status quo to continue. And so, you know, I had a similar reaction to the assassination of the president, where it was, yeah, we're shocked, but we're also not surprised, because you could see the situation that was unfolding. And I think the same thing is true today, that we can be shocked by the headlines, by the imagery we're seeing, but we shouldn't be surprised by what's happening, because this has been building for a long time, and this was in a lot of ways inevitable because of this continuation of foreign policy of the United States. And just to give like one very brief example, and we can talk about the history, we can go back to the revolution, the occupation, coups, but just very concretely, right? There was a deeply unpopular prime minister who had consolidated all political power in Haiti for the last 30 months. There's not a single elected official. And Haitians have been saying for that entire 30 months, this is not sustainable. This is not going to work. You can't just go forward with this one guy and do this and expect everyone to sit there and accept that. And that was met with ridicule, constant undermining of those efforts. And just a day before this latest round of violence, the siege, however we want to term it, there was an announcement that this prime minister was going to stay in power until August of 2025 to oversee elections. So a message to the Haitian people coming from a foreign leader that their illegitimate de facto prime minister that they don't recognize is going to stay there for another year and a half. And we have to understand that that is directly connected to what we've seen happen over the last 3 weeks. And so now we're saying, oh, we were supporting this council, now we want to set up this council, but it was that foreign policy that pushed Haiti into this situation, and until we can recognize that, it's going to be very difficult to chart a different path forward, at least in terms of US policy.
So I just want to give some historical context to this idea of foreign intervention in Haiti. So one of the first groups of elites to request foreign intervention were the enslavers of the Haitian masses. So what causes the enslaved Africans to take over what used to be called the Pearl of the Antilles? It's a class fight between French planters and wealthy mixed race elites who are being disenfranchised from their political rights. And one of the most stunning mistakes or successes of history, they arm their enslaved workers to fight this battle for them. When you think about it this way, it's absolutely absurd, but I see a direct parallel in what we're seeing with what is being mislabeled as gangs. So I am in complete agreement with our colleague Jemima Pierre that a more accurate term is paramilitaries, right? So absolutely, and unfortunately no relation. But these paramilitaries are being financed similarly by people who are experiencing elite panic. But these paramilitaries are the victims and the survivors of the worst catastrophe in the Western Hemisphere. So when we're thinking about this aid state that promised all of this help, and the help did not come, and to see the international community, excuse my language, play in our face, this is what we're seeing that's erupting in Haiti right now. So I just wanted to give that little bit of context about foreign intervention. Foreign intervention has always been part of Haitian state making. And I don't want us to walk away from this event thinking that it's unique to this moment or even in the prehistory of NGOs that you talk about in the book. And that's actually where I'd like for us to go. Talk to me about not the NGOs, but there's an acronym, VSO, Is it VSO? Talk to me.
Yeah, Paul.
Voluntary service organization, which is what the precursor to NGOs. And yeah, so I get into this in the book. You know, I think people who follow Haiti, follow the Republic of NGOs, we see this proliferation of organizations, this outsourcing of the state, where 80% of public services are in the hands of non-state actors. And there are big implications to that, and we can talk about that. But part of what I trace in the book is how that process was created. And it didn't happen by accident, it was actually very intentional. And that is a dynamic that exists all over the world now, where we rely on these for-profit or NGO actors to implement US foreign assistance projects. But that, as so many things, it's the empire's laboratory, as it's often referred to, began in Haiti. So it was, again, under the Duvalier dictatorship, and there was a lot of pressure to at least not be publicly giving money to the Duvalier dictatorship. And so US diplomats on the ground came up with a different way to do it. We didn't want to be seen as directly giving them money, so we started channeling funds through non-governmental organizations, or VSOs, what they were called then, and through the Inter-American Development Bank and these other actors. And so you could see how these conscious decisions, and at the time, right, it was directly meant to, we didn't want Duvalier to take credit for the things that we were doing. We didn't want to give him the PR victory. We didn't want to give the government the PR victory. And perhaps you could understand that if there is a dictatorship and you're trying to take care of it, but those policies never changed, right? And so it was directly intended to undermine the government in a certain way, and in fact, it has continued to do that ever since, because the basic premise underlying those policies has never changed.
So I want us to get a little bit more detailed in that, like specific entities, specific laws, because one of the things that I encourage my students to do is to be precise about the historical thinking. So there's this narrative about Haiti as being punished, and the Western world has never forgiven Haiti. But one of the undercurrents of your argument is it's not malicious punishment. It's the apparatus of this aid state and these international money institutions that set certain requirements on the aid state. So if you could just share some examples about that relationship.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's right. I think there's history baked into it all, right? The institutions that exist, the systems that exist to interact with Haiti are rooted in that history. And so it's been sort of subsumed into these institutions. And the point is that the individual implementing that project might not even know the history of Haiti, right? They probably don't. They're not thinking about that when they're implementing that policy. They're doing their job in the system that existed. And the foreign aid system that we've built, right, is first and foremost about U.S. interest. And that's not a conspiracy theory. It says that at the top of USAID's page, that's what the goal is of USAID. Right? This is not me making this up. And so, right, there are legislative requirements. A huge issue after the earthquake, for example, was that USAID couldn't give money to a local organization if they didn't have 5 years of audited financial statements. I mean, okay, that's hard enough to come up with in the best of times after a catastrophic earthquake where everything's been destroyed. Even if you had that, in theory, you might not have actually physically had that. And so we put up these barriers time and time again, and then it consolidates. So we talk about the outsourcing of the Haitian state, but at the same time as the Haitian state's getting outsourced, the US is outsourcing its own state. And so USAID, which used to actually implement programs themselves, has been privatized. USAID doesn't have staff that actually implements programs for the most part. They rely on contractors and NGOs to do the work. And when we think of NGOs, nonprofits, that's sort of what we think of, maybe a church group, local sort of groups. But the reality is that the biggest players in the US foreign aid system are for-profit contractors. That's been the case for a long time. And they are extremely influential, not just because they are on the ground implementing these programs, but because USAID has become entirely reliant upon them. They can't change. There's nothing else for them to do. They rely on them for everything. And so you see the same players, Commodities International, Development Alternatives Incorporated, and these actors, they're getting the money over and over and over again because there is nothing else. This is the system we've created. And so you see, there have been attempts to try and change this. And I went through, there are small little bits of progress. There are people here who work on localization and pushing this for a long time. Right, and so there is little bits of progress there. But I think as the overall frame, this is how the system still works. And so there's an example I give in the book. After the earthquake, and again, this is not conspiracy, Hillary Clinton during her confirmation hearing said USAID is more of a contracting agency than an operational agency with the ability to deliver results. This was a consensus, right? This was not a controversial position. Everyone knew that getting money to local groups was a more effective way to do development. So why didn't it change? Why didn't we do anything differently? And part of the reason is because to justify a congressional budget for foreign aid, members wanted to help their district. They want something to help themselves. And so it became a jobs program here more than a jobs program in Haiti. But the other reason is because of this reliance on for-profit contracts, it gave them tremendous leverage. And so USAID announced this big program to break apart these big contracts, to get rid of the for-profit contractors, do more local development. And the response of the for-profit contractors was to hire the Podesta Group as a lobbyist, form a coalition, and then directly lobby the US government against those reforms. So their entire revenue stream is from the United States government. They were taking that money, probably not directly, you gotta look around, you can't use US money to lobby the US government, but they figured it out. And lobbying against the reforms that would have affected their bottom line, right? And so, and I think I might read a little excerpt here at some point and talk about this a bunch, but we think of the perception is, well, Haiti's corrupt, so of course we're giving money to US corporations, but that dynamic that I just explained, that is very obviously corrupt to everybody who sees it. It's not illegal. It's perfectly legal here for that to happen, right? And so we have to understand how the system we've created perpetuates this. Even if an individual wants to do something better on the ground, it's very difficult for them to do it.
So I want to connect two things. This idea of job creation here in the US as an unintended or intentional destruction of food sovereignty in Haiti. Can you talk about that and how that the loss of food sovereignty in Haiti plays a part in empowering the aid state?
Yeah, certainly. And it's like one of maybe the most clear examples of this dynamic where you see it's not just aid, it's the connection of aid to foreign policy. And aid and trade, these things, it's all connected, right? It's not just one happening in a vacuum. And so at the urging, forcing of multilateral development banks, the US and others, Haiti slashed its tariffs on rice and other agricultural goods in the mid-90s. And this was part of the neoliberal logic. It was reducing tariffs. This is the free market that's going to work its magic. And what actually happened was an influx of US agricultural goods to Haiti. And so while we were telling Haiti they had to lower their tariffs, we subsidize agricultural producers here. So we're giving billions of dollars to US producers and then sending their excess crops to Haiti, which undermines Haitian farmers, limits Haitians' ability to actually feed themselves, and becomes more reliant on those same external actors, which, again, perpetuates that dynamic and feeds that dynamic, because if you don't have that, then you are going to have to look externally. And, part of what this book is about, too, is how these things consolidate the status quo, not just through dependency, but also that they directly empower the people who have no interest in changing the status quo of Haiti. And so if you become more reliant on imports, that's benefiting the people who control the imports of the country. And that is not a very long list of people. That is a very few people who have monopolies on basically all of the major imports. And so if you're forcing that to happen, you are consolidating the power of the elite in Haiti, who, again, are the ones with the power, who have benefited from this unsustainable system and will continue to do so. And so again, it's not just the policy itself, but it's these consequences, intended or unintended, that are naturally to follow. And I think this we see time and again. And frankly, we can talk more about this at some point, is I think we're seeing the same dynamic today in Haiti, where you see a crisis, you see a difficult situation as an outsider looking in, you want to do something, you want to act. The US says that we need to do something, we have to do something. And what that generally leads to is a short-term action that is convenient for the person that wants to act, and very much not necessarily in the best interest of the people they're trying to help, and in fact, often, as we've seen throughout history, directly against those interests.
It was interesting reading this book within the context of news reports that rice that's currently being sent to Haiti from Virginia is poisoned with arsenic. And this is happening in real time and is directly connected to this aid state apparatus. This idea that donors, whether they're doing it from the goodness of their hearts or just to have a seat at the power table, the money that they are purportedly sending to Haitians actually does not go to Haitians. So can you just walk us through how the money actually never makes it to either the Haitian state or the Haitian people?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna read a little, just a short little excerpt here, and I'm gonna try and do it without dropping the book or the microphone or sound like a total idiot. Or find my place. In mid-January 2013, I sat down with Bill Vastine at his apartment complex in Bentonville. The building, hidden from the street by a tall, thick concrete wall, had been an old hotel. The rooms were primarily full of foreigners who had come to Haiti to work. Ironic in a country with 70% unemployment. 4 days after the earthquake, a former colleague at the US Embassy had given Vastine a call. He had been one of the engineers who helped build the fortress a few years earlier. He had never left. The 49-year-old and almost stereotypically brash Texan and self-described disaster capitalist had been quickly hired as the director of logistics for the US relief mission. The next day, he began work and watched as pallets of relief supplies piled high at the mini green zone at the airport, caught in a bureaucratic maze of overlapping agencies and responsibilities. He watched as US military planes took precedence, and he listened as foreign powers squabbled over the relative priority of their own assistance. Vastine knew disasters. For more than a decade, he had worked with the Army Corps of Engineers and some of the country's biggest construction companies. He immediately recognized that this was going to be one of the most extensive reconstruction efforts in world history. However, he hadn't stayed in Haiti just for humanitarian reasons. Vastine cares about the places he has worked and the people affected by disasters, but he admits he's motivated by something else too. The pay is damn good. In 2009, the Haitian government conducted a study of the industry and found that most foreign aid workers received a, quote, unjustifiable per diem, end quote, of $260 on top of their base salary. Most Haitians survived on less than $2 a day. Quote, you go back to the States and perform essentially the same type of work you do in this country and you make 40 to 60% less, Vastine explained. Over 3 years, Vastine had gone from working at the US Embassy to putting together USAID's big housing plan to evaluating projects for the Clinton-led Reconstruction Commission. From the inside of the aid state, he had seen it all. He agreed to meet on the condition that I bring a bottle of Barbancourt rum and a bottle of Coke. I diligently complied. We drank and talked for hours, interrupted only occasionally by younger co-ed aid workers splashing in the pool behind us. Vastine, a stone-cold realist, had a scathing indictment of the foreign aid system in which he still worked. Why has nothing changed? Vastine asked. Because it's a money-making enterprise, he answered, his voice rising indignantly. We don't want to fix it. We want to continue to come back here and make money attempting to fix it. The whole world is asking, where did the money go? Where is all this money? The answer was pretty straightforward. It's not that the billions had simply been stolen or never spent. Rather, the money went to the wrong places for the wrong reasons and was handled by the wrong people. A significant amount of it simply went to organizational expenses and staff salaries. It is about more than waste and inefficiency, though. In the aftermath of the earthquake, the priority for the international community, as it had been for years, was stability. That response was driven by fear, fear of unrest, fear of chaos, fear of change. Emergency aid functioned as a band-aid, soothing and buying time for a real recovery that the aid itself could never provide. Stability implies a lack of change, and the aid industry delivered just that. It provided basic necessities while consolidating power, money, and influence in the hands of actors unable or unwilling to change. Whether or not that was the goal is irrelevant. That is what happened. And so, it was interesting talking to him because here's a guy he's directly benefiting from it and telling me about how awful it is at the same time. But we do have to understand that, right, this is where the money goes. It's not a big secret. And I was shocked. This is really how I got into this work in the first place, back after the earthquake. And I think my colleagues at CPR understood a lot better than I at the time that what was going to be happening in Haiti was going to have a lot to do with what was being decided here in Washington. And so we set up this blog to monitor relief efforts. And like everyone, the sort of first question we were trying to answer was where was the money going? Who was actually getting it? And it turned out we had better access to information here than the groups in Haiti that we were talking with, because it's all in English. It's in US government databases that you have to be familiar with. You define it. You can get some top level information about where the money goes. And it's pretty shocking, right? So in the first 2 years after the earthquake, 99% of aid bypassed Haitian government institutions or Haitian institutions, companies, organizations, etc. 99% was going, at least initially, to foreign actors, foreign NGOs, foreign companies, forein governments, multilateral banks. And so the response to that is, well, yes, okay, we give the money to these international groups, but then they partner with local organizations and more money gets onto the ground that way. There's an interview in here with a USAID official where also the trickle-down aid economy. These foreigners, they need to live in Haiti, they need to eat in Haiti, they need to socialize in Haiti. And so they're spending lots of money on expensive housing rentals, driving up the rental market and forcing other people out of their homes, right? And sort of like a gentrification-like process where restaurants in Petronville and clubs in Petronville were busy and the economy was moving, but inequality was unchanged in the 6 years after the earthquake. Billions of dollars spent, including direct support to the poorest people in society, and yet inequality was unchanged because the people who were benefiting from all of that money ultimately were not the most impoverished. It was the wealthy people who had that land, who were building hotels, who had the fuel to fill all of their new trucks, who were selling the SUVs to the new incomers in town, right? And so, again, it's not just that the money's going to a foreign entity. It's what is the actual impact of that on the ground in Haiti, and it's not just a lost opportunity. It also is actively doing harm.
I don't want to jump ahead to Kenya, but I'm just going to jump a little bit ahead to Kenya. So I'll start with the question first, but then I'll just say what I want to say about Kenya. I want you to tease out the relationship between the aid industrial complex and the military industrial complex. And here I come back to Kenya. So part of the material gain that Kenya gets from possibly leading this intervention effort is an arms deal to fight terrorism in East Africa. But it's also the possibility of shifting the headquarters of a UN agency to Nairobi. And after the racial reckoning of George Floyd, a lot of US African Americans are now expats on continental Africa. And in continental Africa, there's a conversation about being gentrified by remote workers. And I can only imagine what this proposed UN shift to Nairobi is going to do to that local community. It sounds as if it's exactly going to be what you just described happened with aid workers in Haiti. So let's just go back to the question, what is the relationship between the aid industrial complex and the military industrial complex?
I can just listen to you talk about it. It's okay. You can answer this if you want. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I was talking about the for-profit contractors, Commodics and DAI, and this has been a long time coming in a lot of ways. We were talking about Rice earlier, and I should have mentioned this because Commodics' backstory is fascinating. It was actually originally part of a agricultural conglomerate that was using this consulting arm to open up markets for its agricultural arm to give it market access. This was the roots of it. After the earthquake, Commodics got $130 million to revitalize Haitian agriculture, right? It was just like, that's hits in the face. But how did Commodics get so big? How did DAI get so big? How did all of these players get so big? And this privatization that we've seen take over the aid industry. And the reality is that, while this was a long time coming and related to, a lot of changes that happened in other parts of the government and the US economy overall, where it really took off was in the Middle East, the war on terror, right? It was Afghanistan and Iraq. And so we know the military story there. We know that there were US troops there. We understand this, we saw it. And what we don't realize is that there were also tens of billions of dollars spent on these nation building sort of programs, and it's the same dynamic. That money was going to for-profit contractors that had no real experience in the country and no real experience even in the industries that they were operating in. They're just simply big enough to be able to satisfy all of the requirements in the USAID checklist to get the contract. And so that's really where they blew up. Right? I talk about in the book is, you know, in real time, the military-industrial complex is getting their little sibling, the aid industrial complex, and they follow in the trails. These things are related. And I think we also need to take a step back and realize that foreign aid, to begin with, is rooted in national security. Right? And again, you can go to USAID's website and look at their mission statement. It says it's promoting U.S. national security. This is, again, it's all there. But why did we start it? Right? The first place USAID was created in the early 1960s. USAID workers were on the ground in Vietnam before the U.S. military. So this has always been deeply linked to U.S. national security interest. And I think we need to understand that because it is the soft power arm to the hard power, right? It's existed throughout history. It just is couched in language that is a lot more appealing than war, right? Development sounds good, aid sounds good, we want to do something, but if we don't understand those sort of relationships, you know, I talk a lot about this in the book, is this concept of stability, right? And so we can think of stability in terms of a history of military operations, these stability operations. I mean, this was the logic of the US invasion and occupation of Haiti and much of the rest of Latin America and Caribbean in the early 20th century. You know, these weren't conventional wars. This wasn't the US going to war. These were stability operations. And that's how a lot of aid is couched now and has been, is we need stability. And the question that is rarely asked after that is stability for whom, right? Who are we actually providing stability for? Who do we care about providing stability for? And the answer to that is often not the people who are actually making up the majority of the populations in these places. We're providing stability for a political class, for an economic system that is not taking care of people, for US corporate interest, you name it. I mean, the interests run the gamut, but it's rarely the people themselves, in whether it be Haiti or anywhere. I mean, I think I'm writing about Haiti, but this is not unique to Haiti. It's not a unique story in terms of how the United States operates, how these programs work, and how our institutions and our interaction with the world manifest on the ground.
No, absolutely. I think George Orwell is having a tickle somewhere. Because stability mission just sounds way better than military intervention. But the causes and the impacts are very similar. So I wanted to shift a little bit to the firm establishment of the aid state right before the earthquake, and how the earthquake creates this disaster capitalist moment. Can you talk about how the aid state systematically pushed aside Haitian leaders?
Yeah, so I think in a lot of ways, again, this is a long time coming. And so really after the fall of the Duvalier dictatorship, you saw huge amounts of aid going into Haiti, right? This was, okay, well, what's gonna happen next? We wanna make sure we have some control over what happens next, and the easiest way to do that is through this huge influx of aid. And so these policies have roots in that history, and they were going on for a while, but I think, you know, we really have to go to the 2004 coup, the overthrow of Aristide in 2004, and the entrance of the UN peacekeeping mission, MINUSTA, and almost as importantly as the military side of that was the formation of this entity called the Core Group, which is the US, Canada, France, the OAS, the IMF, the UN, Brazil, the biggest and most traditional sort of donors to Haiti. And so alongside this security mission was the political mission, the Core Group. And for the last 20 years, this Core Group has functioned as basically a de facto fourth branch of government, where it's consulting directly with and working with Haitian governments, Haitian leaders, and in a lot of respects, dictating things. And we saw, people like to say, well, it was a tweet that put Henri into power after the assassination. It was a tweet from the core group, and they put out a press release too, but also a tweet. So we can see this is still the dynamic, and so you saw these plans that were happening basically after 2004, and after the UN troops got on the ground, and there was a big effort. There were a number of hurricanes in 2008 that caused a lot of damage in Haiti, but there wasn't a lot of money raised in response. I mean, a couple $100 million, but to the scale of the devastation, it was really very little. And so there were big plans for Haiti from the international community, from the UN, but they couldn't operationalize it. They didn't quite have the funds to do what they wanted to do. And the earthquake kind of was the perfect opportunity, right? All of a sudden, donors did care about Haiti. They did want to give the money. And so instead of there being $200 million on the table, there were $10 billion on the table. And that's a significant amount of money. Now we're starting to talk about like real interests, real financial interests. And so in a lot of ways it's a money grab. And so you saw what the priorities were. And because I think the connection of these aid policies to the broader economic system that has been imposed on Haiti, right? So the big priority for the international community, for some Haitian leaders throughout history, right, and going back to the revolution, and you can talk about this, please, but it has been based on exports, right, from the very beginning, an extractive relationship from the state to the country and the people. And, we act like the slogan of the Reconstruction era was "Build Back Better," and this is like the slogan that never dies, and it just keeps coming back. But what did that actually mean? I mean, nothing was better. The plan was exactly what the plan had been before, which was exports, and specifically low-wage garment manufacturing exports. That was the development model that the people who were in control of $10 billion thought was in, or whether they actually believed it was in Haiti's best interest or not, this was the policies they pitched as in Haiti's best interest. And so the ultimate flagship reconstruction project, I just think this is insane, because we're talking about an earthquake where up to hundreds of thousands of people died in Port-au-Prince, 1 million people are displaced, a loss of $10 billion, basically the equivalent of all that was pledged, larger than the size of the Haitian economy, gone in an instant. And the flagship reconstruction project is an industrial park. And they tried to put it near the capital, but land is an issue in Haiti, and the land dynamics between the city, Port-au-Prince, and rural areas is different. The city is largely, land has been consolidated under some morally control. The rural areas, actually, Haiti has historically had some of the most equal land distribution in the world. And in rural areas, in a lot of places, that's still the case. And so taking that land in the capital for these big development projects would have meant confronting the elite in the country. And ultimately, that was not something that the big donors wanted to do. It was a lot easier to kick a bunch of peasants off their land in northern Haiti than to do that in the capital. And so the flagship reconstruction project would cost hundreds of millions of dollars in international subsidies to lure a South Korean company into Haiti. So it was 10 years tax-free, we'll build all of the infrastructure, we'll provide housing for the workers, transportation for the workers, you name it. They got the laundry list of subsidies. And it ended up, at best, a 6-hour drive north of Port-au-Prince, right? And that's if you're lucky. It's probably going to take you longer. And so this had knock-on effects, because this was our political priority. It was this industrial park that had absolutely nothing to do with what had just happened. And I talk about Bastien in this book, and he was in charge of putting together this housing plan for Haiti. And the initial plan was to build low-cost housing that could come up really quickly and would be for the displaced population in the capital, which obviously makes sense.
Sorry to interrupt you, but how many jobs were promised and how many jobs manifested? I just want that in the conversation first.
Yes, what the promise of the Caracol Industrial Park was something like 25,000 jobs or something like that. And there was actually a fascinating New York Times investigation of this years ago, where the consultant for SEA, the company that built the factory, and he recounts the conversation with US officials. And they're like, well, we could probably create 5,000 jobs. He goes, well, what if we built the building for you? Well, 10,000 jobs. Well, what if we built housing for all the workers? 15,000 jobs, right? Well, what if it was 10 years tax, 20,000 jobs, right? So just the more you give us, the more jobs we're going to create. Now the company is barely existing in Haiti. I think it does still operate to a certain extent. Maybe somebody here knows more precisely. I'm looking at you, Jess. So it is still operating, but certainly nowhere near the promised benefit. But so, yeah, like I was saying, I mean, this was the great sort of thing, but it affected everything else, because now the priority was this industrial park. It wasn't housing for those displaced. And so this project that Bastien was working on, and these housing experts were working on, which was to build low-cost housing, set it up quick, it could be expanded over time, you're giving people, the ability to take care of their own, and they were supposed to cost $8,000 and be located in the capital. And it took 4 years from the beginning of this plan until the first people started to move into these houses. The plan was to build something like 50,000, like thousands and thousands of houses was the plan. They ended up building 750 houses. They are all right next to the Caracol Industrial Park, and they cost close to $90,000 per house from the initial plan of $8,000. And this is where you see these sort of nefarious connections coming in, because the company that got the contract to do the land survey and the environmental impact assessment was run by Michel Martelly's childhood friend and his advisor on the Clinton-led Reconstruction Commission. So, okay, we knew this was happening, right? I quote a government official in the book saying, yeah, this was a deal that was seen that would please the new government. They'd be happy if we gave the contract to his childhood friend. But what ended up happening, I mean, this is, in fact, the one positive about this story about these houses in the industrial park is it's the one instance after the earthquake where anybody was even remotely held accountable for misdeeds. So the two contractors that built these houses did get temporarily suspended from receiving further US government contracts because they had obtained emails and communications where they built the biggest post-earthquake housing program was not built to earthquake standards. They used substandard concrete, they lied about it on the thing, they saved the money and they pocketed the money, and they had email records showing them talking about this and doing it. Oh. And so those companies got blacklisted temporarily, but not forever. We never brought legal charges. There was a grand jury convened in Maryland, there was an investigative process, and why that got shut down, I saw some of the evidence. It seemed pretty much like a slam dunk to me. But this gets into domestic politics too, because I think we have to understand this dynamic, which is that what motivates policy choices in Haiti, it's not just economic interest, it's also our own political interest. It is the political interest of the policymakers themselves. And so after the earthquake, we were working on accountability, where'd the money go, tracking the stuff, and there was a lot of interest in Congress. And people they wanted to know, things weren't going well. This was obvious to anybody with eyes that things weren't going well. And so, yeah, we wanted to ask questions. Members of Congress wanted to ask questions. But then an electoral process started in the US. And the Democratic nominee was somebody who had just taken a very, very public role in Haiti's reconstruction. And the failures of that reconstruction effort was a political liability here. And so a lot of people who were interested in talking about accountability all of a sudden weren't. And on the other side, Republicans weaponized those allegations, weaponized the accountability for their own political gain, but didn't actually care about making aid work, right? That wasn't the goal. And so we saw this issue of where did the money go, of trying to hold people accountable, basically just become a political football in the US presidential election. And again, in the case of history repeating itself, we're seeing that same dynamic play out right now, where it is a partisan fight over Haiti that is taking place right now in the media, with Democrats blaming Republicans for blocking aid and Republicans blaming Democrats for causing migration, and this back and forth that is going to lead to policy choices that have nothing to do with Haiti, but are about the political power of politicians in the United States. So hold on, I'm going to kick this back to you now. I'm going to ask you a question. Because all of these things, right, and I think this is what made me think about it too, is the political interest in the US, and often the way the US political system interacts with Haiti, and almost always for the worse, is through migration. And I know you have your own history there, you've done a lot of work in this area, so yeah, why don't you tell us about all that?
Okay, so if it's not apparent yet, I'm a very nerdy historian, and I was traveling to Haiti to do dissertation research, and then the earth just split apart and completely transformed my life. I was completely underqualified to work on the Haitian side of things, but as a Haitian immigrant myself, I have over 3 decades of learning how to navigate the US system. So rather than concentrating my efforts on Haiti, and it was really wonderful to look at this book because it gave me context for some of the on-the-ground work that I was doing with earthquake traumatized migrants. So as a grad student at NYU was very generous in their support of reconstruction efforts. So I was just able to pair my institution and get them to funnel money into direct services because I already had an inkling that the NGOs weren't working. So when we were being evacuated out, I think we saw some of the Minister soldiers, and they were from Israel, and they spoke no Creole, they spoke no French. And when we would like bang on the car doors, can you help us? They would let us know that is not part of our mission, right? And when we get to the airport, and the airport scene, frankly, reading some of this was quite triggering because I was at the airport watching, I didn't see Gupta, but I saw Robin, what's her name? Robin somebody, she's still on television. So you dissociate from the experience of surviving the earthquake in order to do recovery work. So the easiest way for me to do it as an educator was to work with young people. So you have these children who are migrating, and not only are they traumatized by the earthquake, but funding at that time was not funding mental health interventions. So reading this book really helped me understand, even though we could observe irregular behaviors in these children, the funders weren't interested in that. They were interested in literacy. So we pushed literacy and we would make arguments about the sending context. So you have this state apparatus that hasn't been functional for quite some time. So these students have learning gaps. And as a Haitian immigrant, I could successfully advocate to some of these US-based NGOs to give us the type of sponsorship that we need in order to help these ESL students, English language learners, and something called SIFE, which is Students with Interrupted Formal Education. And frankly, for Haitians, education has been interrupted persistently since the 90s. So I could articulate those arguments in order to get funding to the Flanbwayan Haitian Literacy Project. And in many ways that was cathartic for me because I could not speak about the earthquake for years. But I knew how to fundraise for these young people who were coming in. And as I watch the news and I hear how people are speaking about the paramilitaries and I think about how young they are, these are the equivalents of the students that I'm able to help here. And just being able to see how the aid state works in Haiti and how I, as someone who was just innocently wanting to help, empower that, right? So this is where this alternative career emerges. And as I was reading through this book, I'm thinking about legislators who have control over education. So one of the stunning things that I learned was charter schools are not required to do L language programming. Who do I lobby to about that, right? So I'm learning a lot from the nefarious uses of NGOs in Haiti as a way to fortify the work that we've been doing here in the US. And I just want to close on this point. We have the unique opportunity to be the first responders for these people that are coming here. This room has a lot of intellectual capital and civic privilege. Because when we're thinking about the checklist for aid, it's our legislators who decide this. Is there a way that we can implement pressure in the way that our conservative colleagues have been systematically successful in doing? So that's where the intersection of my historical work and activist work in Haiti begins.
Thank you.
But I have so many other questions, but I really want to hear from people in the audience. And I think we got the green light to do the little, or do you have,
Yeah, whatever you want.
okay.
Want to do that? You want one more question, and then we'll
Yeah, okay, one last question. So, can we just talk some more about tariffs and taxes and how that undermines sovereignty?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is,
Actually, no, I'm sorry, I think we addressed that a little bit. No, we talked about the economic institutions. Can we talk about the OAS and the political institutions that inform the 8th state?
yeah, that's great. I'd love to talk about
Okay.
that. My favorite, the OAS. Yeah. I mean, I think this is the sort of the other side of it. You know, I talked about the outsourcing of public services, and I think we can talk a little bit right now about what that leads to, because it disconnects a population from the government, right? If you can't hold it as a Haitian, you can't hold the NGO accountable the way you can hold your own government accountable. And there are issues with that, which is the electoral process, so we'll get to that. But right, if the donors are funding this thing, the entity on the ground is responsible to their donors in a different country, but not responsible to that population in the same way. And that disconnects a people from its government, and that has big implications. And parallel to that effort, this outsourcing of the state was not confined to just public services. It touched the very core of what we think of as democracy, which is the electoral process itself. And so you've seen in Haiti electoral processes that are funded by the international community. The international community provides training to the electoral workers. They do the get out the vote campaigns, and then ultimately they're the ones who confer legitimacy upon the results. So they're the ones who observe it. They're the ones who declare it legitimate or not legitimate. And what happens is, right, if there's a government that we like, it's usually legitimate. If there's a government we don't like, it's usually illegitimate. And that's the basic way it happens. But these things in parallel, right, where you see overturned elections, and just like give a little detail, I think this was really something that crystallized all of this for me, and I think there's another big reason why I continue to do this, was the electoral process in Haiti after the earthquake in 2010. There were 1 million people displaced. It was pretty obvious to everybody that this was going to be extraordinarily difficult to pull off and likely a total mess. And it predictably was. A number of candidates held a press conference at noon on election day to denounce the entire thing. The candidate who led that had drafted the statement the night before, had reserved the room at the hotel earlier. This was a coordinated effort. Didn't matter what was happening on the ground. They were going to disrupt this election. And that's exactly what happened. There were protests all over the country. Polling stations got burned down. There were protests in the Capitol. So huge swaths of the vote never even got counted. But they came out a week later with the results. And it showed a really tight election between second and third. And Haitian elections are your top two go to a runoff. And there were protests, there was concern. And given the extent of the problems, the disenfranchisement of millions of people who couldn't even find the right voting center, 20% of the vote was never even counted because the vote was disrupted or was fraudulent or whatever. And yet the difference is like a couple thousand votes. It's like, you can't have any real idea of what the real intention of the voters were here. This is going to be a political choice. But what happened was the Haitian government brought the OAS into the country. This was the OAS that at the time that they came into the country to analyze the vote, they were still backing the legitimacy of this electoral process in the face of all of it, the evidence that told everyone else that it was illegitimate. They totally backed it. They said, no, even these problems, we're still good. It's fine. We can still move forward. But then they came in. They didn't do a recount. They didn't do a statistical analysis of missing votes. They just picked a threshold and said if a candidate got more than that number of votes in any voting station, it's fraudulent. And they set it up here, and they lowered it, and they lowered it, and they lowered it, and they lowered it, until they got to a level where it changed second and third place. And the government's candidate, who had been in second, all of a sudden was in third. And Michel Martelly's party, and Michel Martelly, who had organized this press conference on the day of the vote with the express intention of disrupting the entire thing, got placed into second place and moved on to the runoff. And obviously, the Haitian government didn't have to accept the recommendations of the OAS, except they kind of did, because that is the power of the international community. And this was, again, the year after the earthquake. And so you had the US ambassador to the UN speaking at the UN directly saying, you won't get our aid if you don't accept the results that we're giving you about your election. And there are so many more details about that electoral process in here. Interviews with the former president at the time, who recalls even before the OAS got into the country, meeting with diplomats and the US ambassador, where they very clearly told him that it doesn't fucking matter what the results are. Your guy is not going to the second round, period. And that was obvious. The head of the Electoral Council at the time has since come out and said, yeah, these weren't the real results. Yep, this wasn't real. We had electoral councils at the time that we were working with. I mean, at CEPR, we hand transcribed every single tally sheet that was posted online and ran our own statistical tests on it to see what the levels of fraud were. And there was fraud. There was fraud across the board. Everyone was committing fraud. It was obvious that you couldn't come up with a legitimate result of this election. The only answer was to rerun it and hold it better. And the Haitian government at the time, to their credit, actually offered to do so. And it was stone cold flatly rejected by the international community, because it was not about democracy, it was about stability. And that is ultimately what this choice comes down to, the international community. And again, it's stability for who? It certainly wasn't the people who had just tried to vote in that election. So yeah, we can see how this happens, and you know, yeah, there's a lot more in here. The OAS has done plenty of things in Haiti.
No, absolutely. And it's, just as a historical footnote, this is exactly the genesis of the Haitian state. So you have these revolutionary leaders who are trying to create this state for citizens who 2 minutes ago were property. But they're still living in an enslaved Atlantic world that is demanding the produce of these new black citizens. How do you do that when your sovereignty is constantly being threatened, well, at that time, by France? Well, you betray the democratic ideals of the masses of your people, and you have this separation between state and nation. And what Jake's book does is it shows us how this state that was constructed to betray the freedom dreams of the masses becomes an aid state that circumvents also a broader disinterest in the African diaspora. So what's going on in West Africa is absolutely fascinating right now, but we're not hearing about it because it's challenging what Jay calls US economic, the USAID thing. Whatever, but it's this idea, it's this idea that we need to extract these resources from the African diaspora for the interest of our citizenry, right? So if our comrades in West Africa are successful, France is going to be going through an economic depression pretty soon. So we need to think about Haiti and what's going on in the African diaspora together, and racism is always going to function as a veil for us to not think about them together.
Well, actually, I have a few questions. So, one, this is for both of you. Often, what's been discussed in the international relations, like scholars community, and like when we talk about like scholars of IR and scholars of conflict resolution, when they look at Haiti, they think, okay, we have this unfortunate predetermined notion of, okay, failed state like Somalia and things like that. But how do we encourage there to be a shift of the narrative that it is not that, and that there is, and that, you know, there is obviously hope, you know, that things can shift. And then also, when it comes to the idea of the aid state, this is, you know, the first time I've kind of ever heard of it being described almost in the same way as the military-industrial complex. How can we better educate people in the US and most of the Western world to understand the flaws in our current foreign aid system? And three, on a similar note, is there, what can everybody like us do to become better aware of how, in order to ensure that the money that we send gets to where it needs to go?
I live in the 19th century.
It's like an excuse for that. Yeah, so I mean, you know, in terms of scholars, I think that this is kind of the point of why I wrote this book, right? Is to make that case to that community of IR scholars, these people who look at this and care about U.S. foreign policies, because their eyes are closed to this reality, and whether it's a conscious thing or a subconscious thing, they're just not actually analyzing the situation on the ground or the actual impacts of U.S. policy. They're not paying attention to it. So how do you change that? I mean, you know, slowly, chip, chip, chip. You know, right? We try and shine a light on this. We try and keep pushing. We try and raise the profile of these things and expose the misdeeds and the actual impacts of these policies, and hope it resonates. And I think, you know, a lot of the work that we end up doing is basically, we were having a conversation about this earlier, it's damage control. If they're not going to see how this actually works, then we got to figure out ways to just make it a little bit less bad in the short run, because the dominant narrative, like the dominant things are going to continue, and their ability to actually look at what's going on in Haiti or see beyond that predisposition, I think is really tough. Sorry, there's a few questions in there. Now I'm losing the train.
What I could add is just being very aware of what legislation your congressperson advocates for, and lobbying around that. So I was living in California during Prop 8, and the fact that everyone knows exactly what I mean when I say Prop 8, if there's a way to figure out specific policies that your legislator is advancing, you can organize around that.
Yeah, Andy, you got anything for us? What's gonna move Congress? Huh? How can we convince you guys to act? You know, what's the issue there? Huh? Call your representative. Is that the message?
Well,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, I mean, look, I'm sitting here as someone who's been, you know, very publicly critical of the president about the war in Gaza, right? To talk about something very different. I'm not changing the subject. I'm just saying that, but even though that really needs to happen, I think that until, you know, we have a whole political party in our country that's left the realm of democracy altogether, and that isn't serious about having conversations about foreign policy or domestic policy. And in order to change something like Haiti, we have to give a huge thumping to that party and get
so that they can reinvent themselves as a legitimate,
you know, party, and we can begin to have a functional democracy in our own country again. So we've got a lot of work to do here, and it distorts our ability
to even have serious conversations
about something like Haiti. So we got to take care of our own democracy this November and get more serious people in Congress who will talk serious about Haiti. I will say, you know, it's disappointing. I mean,
when I left Congress
in
last January, the
Democrats also lost control of the House, right? So, but
the Haiti caucus that I
created hasn't survived me leaving very well, and that's a huge disappointment. So I guess, you know, to the professor's good point, we have to demand that Congress even pay the first bit of attention to Haiti and do serious oversight on it, which isn't even happening now, which is really, it's pathetic.
And to encourage inclusion, si gen ken moun nan sal nan ki ta vle mande an kesyon nan kreol, mwen ka tradi pou paske nou vle tande perspektiv ou sou sa nan pale an. Merci.
I think, please go for it.
But I was assuming that you were encouraging other people to, or maybe Haitians to
Yes, no, just in case if there are people who want to express themselves in Creole, I can translate, yeah.
Okay. Well, I can't. But so, my question, I'm try to do my best to frame it as a question. Maybe just ask for your comments on it. I thought about this in the references to what Dr. Pierre mentioned in terms of, now I'm lost in my train of thought. Let me just ask, I don't remember what prompted it, but references to international community, we often think of it always as those who preside over the countries, the ruling class who are in the government, and not the people who may not be in a particular country, but represent some disposition, some political framework, some position on it. We never refer to that as the international community. We always refer, and often even left up to them being Western countries. Oh, that's what it was. You mentioned West Africa and different things. If you can comment on, also, and this happens with CARICOM in this Western Hemisphere and other regional bodies like ECOWAS and whatnot in Africa, that often these bodies are comprised of representatives of an elite class, what we in the Black Line Peace call the misleadership class, or the comprador class. And so that's, and as a result, what they do in response to resistance and people-centered efforts for self-determination is go along with imperialism, right? And so and it can also confuse things, just like Kenya being willing to offer a police force or some kind of military force. If you can talk about that, and also in the nature that when we say, when we talk, because you and I, Jake, we're talking about damage control kind of thing, but it also leaves the notion is that that's all we can hope for. That we don't really think about what does liberation look like for Haiti or any place else. I mean, liberation, self-determination, and we understand that countries like Honduras, who now led by revolutionaries like the Museum Archival, why they take the position now is because it takes revolutionaries to be in the lead, as opposed to other countries like Cuba and all them. They're really on the side of Haiti, but they marginalized in the media. I'm sorry. Let me boil this down to a question. So how can we promote, instead leaving it up to the presiders over what we call the global ruling class? I mean, in other words, not leaving it up to them, dismiss that as the path to some sort of solution, and look at the people's movements on the ground, like we're seeing in the Sahel states and whatnot. They had to overthrow this compradors in order to, and so what do we do to build that up? Not leaving the situation over to those who really want to maintain it, How do we deal with decolonization? And not thinking that we can look to our colonizers, the colonized can look to the colonizers to get rid of colonization.
Yeah, thanks, Hank. I think this connects to your last question too, which is, if you want to actually support Haiti, what does it look like, right? And it's solidarity, right? I think.
How do you actually get to the point where we have a movement that kind of is led by the Toussaint Louverture of the 21st century? Okay, that's a big one. But we can start with just basic solidarity, right? I mean, I think there's the easy way out. I mean, you want to do something to support Haiti, you want to do something to help Haiti, and you can text 4 digits to something and donate $10, or you can put in the work, talk to people who know something, do some research, and find the organizations on the ground who are organizing, who are fighting, who are resisting, who are doing that, and find ways to stand in solidarity with them. And whether that's financial or political or whatever it looks like, I mean, that's the ultimate answer, is you gotta ask them. I mean, this is the big problem with Haiti, and this is sort of the answer, is what does it actually look like? Let's ask them what they actually want, what's gonna be helpful, what's gonna support their fight, and try and provide that. And maybe it's money, maybe it's something else, but we gotta start by asking the questions.
Just 2 points. I absolutely see grassroots organizations as part of the international community. So when I was discussing my work as an organizer around English language learners, by reading this book, I realized how I was complicit in this aid state dynamic as someone who wanted to help my country. So when we're thinking about how grassroots organizations can be supported, it definitely has to be local. Because I am 100% confidently saying I do not have enough of an understanding of on-the-ground dynamics in Haiti to be useful. But I do know enough about grassroots organizations here that can be solidarity in terms of raising awareness. So to our colleague Jemima Pierre's point, these are not gangs. These are paramilitaries who are being financed by members of what Jake is calling this elite panic. I didn't hear the word you used to call the CARICOM elites. Compradors, there we go. So we understand how those folks work once they get into those institutions, but we also have to be clear about who can we reliably organize with and consistently organize with. And I just want to bring up an example in the book about, I think it was Mokaïs, the self-sufficient settler, Mosaic. So Jean Casimir has this concept. He rejects this term maroon, because maroon is a term that comes from slavery, you're running away. And Jean Casimir makes this argument, maroons are self-sufficient settlers. So when I was reading that acronym, IDP, I was like, no, these people are self-sufficient settlers, and they are showing us what the will of the Haitian people is. And as people who are anchored in the heart of empire, there are ways that we can be in solidarity by raising up their efforts.
And I just want to say another thing, and I think, it can be easy, and we're talking about things, and I'm talking about all these terrible dynamics and sort of things that seem intractable, but I'm a hopeful guy. I'm an optimistic guy. I'm optimistic about Haiti's future too, and it is not to deny the challenging situation on the ground today, the difficulty, but what I write about it in the book, right, is I reject the term failed state, but it doesn't mean the state hasn't failed, right? I mean, the state has been failing for a long, long time in terms of actually failing the population. And so, yes, the state is collapsing, the state is disappearing in Haiti right now, but we shouldn't see that as inherently a bad thing. People are fighting to hang on to it. People are fighting to maintain the status quo that is not working. But it is the destruction of the state that existed that can allow for something else to be built. And that is the hope, right? That's the optimism. And so I think we have to keep that in the forefront, that's not a fight that's gonna happen. It's not gonna be achieved tomorrow, right? It's not, but in a long-term perspective, I mean, this is the fight that's happening in Haiti right now. What is the new state that can be built? Can they build a new state? Will that effort be prevented? Who's going to fight against it? Who's going to fight for it? These are the sort of battle lines that are being drawn in Haiti.
This is working, okay.
Eugenia, is that you?
Yes, that is me, darling. Hi, Jake. Good to see everybody. How does one first don't believe the propaganda. Take a little time to do some research for yourself. What you see on CNN and the popular corporate media, listen to a non-corporate media, what they are saying about it. Do some more readings about what's actually going on. If you want to understand what's happening in Haiti right now, I encourage everybody here to purchase that book, read it, but also read NSSM 70. It was a document that was written during the time of Henry Kissinger. It details out what is occurring in Haiti right now, what they were going to do. Okay. That document, NSSM 70. It is the National Security Study Memorandum, written during the time when Henry Kissinger was running foreign policies. We all know Henry Kissinger. So if you read that document, you will realize what is unfolding in Haiti was written years ago. Haiti is not a failed state. I'm sorry, Jack, but I gotta state that. Haiti is not a failed state.
the Haitians are standing to do a second revolutions and say no to imperialism and oppressions. They are saying no to the US occupation that has been in Haiti since 1915. What is happening right now, you are seeing the Haitian people saying, we want our empire back. Haiti is an empire, not a republic. We want to go back to us being an empire. So we want people here in the United States to support the Haitian people's will. We don't want a Haitian-led solutions. That means the US and the rest of the international community get to decide for us what the solution is going to be. They select a puppet. We don't want a Haitian-led solution. We want a Haitian solution. If you want to help, look at redistricting here in the United States. When the nature of our Congress is changing here in the US, who's being elected into office, that's how you begin to help. Because who you put in Washington who's making those policies is what impacting my people in Haiti. So let's change the narrative here at home. It's gonna change in Haiti as well.
A little further. All right. I'll try to figure it out. First of all, thank you so much for this conversation. I found it very cogent and illuminating. A lot of what I was thinking about during this talk was this idea of cui bono. You know, who benefits, cui bono, from these decisions. And so my question would be that if in this country the democratic struggle hasn't reached a point where the economy is mobilized for social progress, but rather it continues to go for private profits, with this long history of different countries pilfering in Haiti, would you all want to see more of an isolationist sort of policy when it comes to Haiti, not accepting, you know, a lot of these big IMF or whatever have you, and just focusing on the grassroots? Or is that really possible in this interconnected world that we live in?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I think, you know, it differs between short and long term too. I think the idea that it would be possible for Haiti to tomorrow entirely decouple from the international community, as in the governments, as pointed out, right, from the US, from these institutions, I think would be practically impossible. And that is the dynamics that I'm describing in this book, is like the state practically is these entities, right? And so to just sever that entirely overnight, I don't think is necessarily practical, but I think it's more about changing that relationship, right? And so, I mean, I'd like to believe in a world where the US government can stand in solidarity with the Haitian people, right? I mean, is that possible tomorrow? I don't know, right? Probably not. But that's gonna take work, and you have to fight to get there. That's a world I'd like to see happen. But again, I mean, how do you get there? I think is a different question. But, you know, for me personally, no, it's not about ending or isolating anything. It's about changing those relationships and changing the interest behind them, and also changing the nature of them. You know, this concept of solidarity, I think is what needs to animate that rather than what we've seen in the past. So I know it's 8 o'clock. Right? Last question is right. I think last question.
Hi. Well, I guess I was gonna ask two questions that kind of working together. But the first question I wanted to ask was, how do you think, because I know we talked about like imports and exports and how these families that operate all that benefit from that. What about like on the banking side, how like, you know, the owners of like Sojibank, Unibank, Big Ash, all of them, how do they, you know, how do they benefit from the chaos? And furthermore, because I saw your tweet yesterday about the shooting in La Boule, how do you feel about a lot of international people suggesting that barbecue and Guy Philippe be part of the solution for Haiti moving forward?
That's going to be your last question.
Can I give my easy short response to them?
Please.
So, my perspective on the paramilitary leaders is we cannot presume that they are puppets of the elite, and to not acknowledge their presence and engage them in some sort of serious way, we would be planting the seed of failure before any solution is complete. So that's my short answer about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, not much to add. I mean, I think, we look at what's happening, we could have spent the whole night tonight talking about what's happened over the last 3 weeks, the dynamics, and what's going to happen from here. And, for me, right, what we're seeing is this political negotiation process happening backed by external powers. And the strategy seems to be pretty clear. I mean, functionally, you have two options right now. You can bring in a foreign military force and try and kill everybody, or you can sit down and talk. And so for me, that's not really a question, right? I mean, who is the victim of the first? We know who the victims of that are going to be. And so that's just what requires. And I think we also have to understand, and Nathalie and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, is no matter what we think of these armed groups, and I don't believe the rhetoric, right? I mean, I've been investigating some of these people for a long, long time, and I know way too much about their connections to believe in what they're saying, but we have to understand the power of what they're saying and the truth of what they're saying. I mean, when you say the system needs to change, that inequality is the heart of this, that this state has left you behind, that's exactly what I say.